Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Ramik Hunt. This is my live. Today's topic is food is medicine. So give everybody a minute and we'll get started. Let me just make sure everything is set up. And all right. So today, this is a really interesting topic that I think is really important to because using food as medicine is something that we don't generally think about, but you do hear people talking about it. But I want to make sure that I put it as simply as possible so that you can understand what I mean by food is medicine. And this topic is as much about what you don't put in your mouth as it is what you put in your mouth. And so we're going to talk about both things that you should be eating as medicine to help with any health ailments, but also things that you shouldn't be eating as it can hinder or hurt your health. And so we need to talk about both. And so the whole concept of me doing these things is to try to make it as simply as possible, which is why we call the book No Guesswork, because we don't want you to have to do a lot of guesswork about what to do. And so that's the reason I want to just break it down really simply and then take it from there. So what is a food for as medicine? So the basic premise is to be able to eat food that you don't have to worry about causing any illness, and that it will help to make your life even better. And so that's what the whole basis of this is. And there's so many things you can focus on health ailment wise, but what I'd like to focus on is what I do as a specialty, and that is obesity. And the reason that I focus on obesity as a primary health element is because obesity is the cause of many other diseases. In fact, obesity has been associated with 236 different medical conditions and counting. And so obesity is a big player and has its tentacles in a lot of different health issues. And so that's the reason why it's important to focus on obesity, because if you focus on obesity, you will, what I call an obesity-centric approach, you will, in effect, treat these other elements that are associated with it. And so that's where my focus is. That is where this food for medicine is going to talk to you about, as well as just some other tidbits. And so what is food for medicine? And as you can imagine, what I'm going to say, the first thing, it should be a low carbohydrate diet. And the reason it should be a low carbohydrate diet is, as I mentioned before, that if your carbohydrates are high, it is an inflammatory diet. And it is a diet that produces insulin resistance and therefore increasing your risk of heart disease, because insulin resistance leads to bad cholesterol, leads to heart disease and blockage of your arteries. And so it's important that we focus on a low carb diet, but more importantly, that we focus on reducing your sugar and reducing your refined carbohydrates. And so those are the two carbs that are really the main things that we need to focus on. Now, there's another carb that is actually really, really good for you, and that is fiber. Fiber is good for you. And so we want you to get the fiber, but we want you to reduce the sugar and refined carbohydrates. And the refined carbohydrates are mostly starches. So things that we like, right? Bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, all the things that are very convenient and easy to grab. And a lot of our processed foods are made up of these starches. And so those are some of the things that we should limit. So food for medicine, like I said, we're going to talk about the things that you should eat, but also the things that you should avoid eating, because putting bad food in actually then leads to health ailments, so that if you don't eat those things, it actually makes you healthier. And so we're going to use food to prevent and to treat diseases. And one good example is type 2 diabetes. A low-carb diet is as effective or as powerful as any medicine I can give someone for type 2 diabetes. In fact, when someone does a low-carb diet the way it's instructed, we typically take them off of their medications because they don't need them, because the diet itself is so powerful that you don't need it, and you end up curing your diabetes. Or if you don't cure it completely, you control it very, very well. And that is the way I approach treating type 2 diabetes, for instance. That is one of the simplest ways to get someone type 2 diabetes under control is to reduce their carbohydrates. And you could do this with type 1 as well. But type 2, because it's such a disease that is revolved around insulin resistance and your sensitivity to carbohydrates, that it is a very, very effective tool at decreasing diabetes. The other thing is that because inflammation is what causes most diseases, but in particular cancer. And so if you can reduce your inflammation, you can reduce your cancer risk. And we know that a low carb diet is an anti-inflammatory diet, and so that it reduces your inflammation and allows for you to prevent either a new cancer or a recurrent cancer. So there's studies that have been done to show that if you lose weight and you reduce the fat that's in your belly, you will reduce the amount of your risk of getting breast cancer again. So that we've done studies to show that if you have breast cancer and you reduce your weight, you significantly reduce your risk of getting a second breast cancer. And so that, again, which is why we try to focus on getting rid of your abdominal fat, because that is the fat that causes a lot of problems. And then the other thing is that you should make sure that you get enough protein. So protein is important for a lot of different reasons. We talked about ghrelin, how protein decreases your ghrelin, so therefore it will decrease your risk and it will decrease your hunger and your cravings. But what I didn't talk about as far as it relates to protein much is that protein helps you to build and maintain your muscle mass. And building and maintaining your muscle mass is very important to help boost your metabolism. So a low carb diet with moderate amount of protein is actually a metabolism boosting diet, which is good for you. And so it's important that we make sure we get enough protein in our diets, one, to boost your metabolism, but two, to make sure that you can help to control your cravings and hunger, and that will help you be very, very successful. And so what are the actual foods then that we should be eating? But before I do that, I do want to talk more about why a low carb diet is very helpful, because I had a patient who was not doing so well, and believe it or not, they were on a plant-based diet. Now you may say that plant-based diets are very good diets, and the answer to that question is absolutely. A plant-based diet that is well formulated is a good diet. It needs to be well formulated. They're different, just like there are different types of low carb diets, there are different types of plant-based diets. But a plant-based diet is very, very effective at reducing atherosclerosis. It's good for your health overall, but it needs to be well formulated. I have a patient who I saw the other day who is on a plant-based diet. The patient is vegan. And so you would think, oh, they're vegan, so that means it must be great. But it was, their vegan diet wasn't so great. So they were a strict vegan, but they had in their diet a lot of refined carbohydrates. So they were eating a lot of bread, they were eating a lot of pasta, a lot of potatoes, they were eating a lot of sweets. And so they ended up having fatty liver, which means you get a lot of fat deposited in your liver that can then cause, ultimately, cirrhosis. And they had a lot of visceral or abdominal fat that was causing them to, they became type 2 diabetic. And so a plant-based diet is a good diet if it's well formulated. And so I want to make that clear, that we need to make sure that when we say, oh, this is a good food for, for your health, we need to make sure that we're doing it correctly, because this patient enjoyed French fries, enjoyed sweets. And so all the food that they were eating, they were like, but doc, I'm a vegan. But all these things were affecting their health in a negative way. And I've had patients who were either vegan or vegetarian who weren't following the diet the way it should be done. It wasn't well formulated. Some people have heart disease. So it is a very, very good diet, and it is a diet that I recommend. However, it needs to be well formulated. That is key, that you make sure that the diet is well formulated. And if you do a well formulated plant-based diet, then you will see how it can positively affect your health. And so that's very, very clear. And an NGW diet is mostly plant-based. When you start the NGW diet, we want to first get you off of the carbohydrates, but ultimately the goal is to do a low-carb Mediterranean diet, which is mostly plant-based. And so, but we also want to make sure you get your protein. So if you can get your protein through mostly plants, that's great. But it's okay to also have fish and other meats, but you do need to focus on getting your green veggies. And the other thing that we don't talk about much is water. You need to make sure that you get enough water throughout the day, because that helps to keep you hydrated. It actually even helps for hunger, and it is good for overall cellular health. So that's important too. And so what are the foods that you should be eating? So let's break it down by category. So then let's start with veggies. You should be eating a lot of green veggies. So things like broccoli and kale and watercress. A lot of people don't eat watercress, but that's a very nutritious, because there's a lot of nutrients in it. So you should be eating that. And fruit. you should be eating fruit, but you should avoid high carb fruits. And the reason is because like I said before, your body can't tell the difference between the sugar that it will get from a high carb fruit than it will a Snickers bar. So it's important that you eat your fruit, but you make sure that it's low or moderate amount of carbs. And a good low carb fruits, as we discussed, are berries. So berries are good. And any berry, strawberry, blackberry, blueberries, any berry is good and it's very low in carbs. And a handful of berries is less than 10 grams of carbs. So that is very good to have. And then so that's a food for medicine, as a medicine, because it also has a lot of antioxidants that help to prevent cancer. And so that's a very good go-to snack to have. And then nuts. Nuts are very good too as a medicine. And the reason is because nuts are packed with healthy fats. So those fats, those monounsaturated fats that we all talk about, those fats that allow, that help you with your heart. So it's good for your heart and good for your cholesterol. Those are the things that we should be focusing on. And the other thing is, like I said, make sure you get your water. And the other thing is to make sure that you get other protein like salmon and other protein, and particularly salmon and other fish, because that's good to get your omega-3s. And it's important to get your omega-3s because you want to have a good omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. So the things that you should be eating, food is medicine, is your green veggies. You should be eating fruit, but try to make sure it's low carb. You should be eating nuts because it's good and healthy for your heart. You should be eating good amount of protein, whether you get it from a plant-based protein or other protein sources like fish, like salmon, where you can also get your omega-3s. You should be drinking a lot of water. And those are things that those should be your staple foods to eat every day. And the things that you should avoid, because we got to talk about those too, because those are the things that are going to counteract all the good things that you're doing. So the things that you should avoid are sugar, of course, sweets, and sugar-sweetened beverages. So avoid sodas, avoid fruit juices, because fruit juice and soda is just basically liquid sugar. And it gets into your system very quickly, and it slams your liver. And that is what then ends up with people getting fatty liver. So it's important that you decrease that. And then, again, I know people don't like it, but you need to reduce your refined carbohydrates. So you do need to limit the starches, so bread, rice, pasta, potato. You need to limit those things. Doesn't mean you can't have them at all, but you should limit them. And, I try to tell people, don't mess around too much, because then you might overdo it and then you get back into that bad habit that you had before. So it's important to limit it and keep your staple foods as whatever your protein source is, whatever your green veggie source is, and then water. That is your main staple. And then your healthy snacks. So your nuts and your berries. And these are things that are going to help you with your health overall. And instead of taking a pill to treat, let's say, your diabetes, you could be taking food to treat your diabetes. And that's what's key, to make sure that you can actually reduce the amount of medications that you have just by eating a healthy diet. And that's all you really have to do. And so, even though this last thing I'm about to mention is not food, but it's very, very important as a medicine too, is your physical activity. We talk about food mostly because one of the 80-20 rules of obesity is that 80% of weight loss is diet and 20% of it is food. Exercise or physical activity. You want that physical activity, but you do need to focus on that 80%. And so we talk mostly about your diet and making sure you get your diet right, because that is really difficult as well, because we're bombarded with so many things that are not food for medicine, that we try to focus and steer you in the way so you can eat a healthy diet. But physical activity is important as well. And so want to make sure you maximize your NEAT. And for those who weren't on before, NEAT stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So basically all of the activity you do outside of exercise. And we also want to make sure you get in your planned exercise. But more importantly than that is your NEAT. So we want to make sure you keep your NEAT going and get your steps up. Basically whatever is on, get your Fitbit up to 10,000 steps. So to conclude, your food for medicine is not only all the things you should eat, but also all the things that you shouldn't eat. And the main thing is to keep your carbohydrates down, because it increases your insulin resistance, it increases your inflammation, and wreaks havoc throughout your system. And so that it leads to cancer, diabetes, insulin resistance, heart disease. And so get your carbohydrates down, keep your nutrients up with your protein as well as your green veggies. So make sure your diet is full of plant-based foods so that you can keep all your nutrients and your antioxidants. And then your snacks, same thing with the berries and the nuts and all those great snacks. You can just have a nice, colorful diet. And so I'm going to end there. I'm going to look and see if there's any questions that I missed while I was talking. I didn't get a chance to look. And someone said a lot of the vegans eat pizza and fries, and that was kind of my point about. So thanks for making that comment about you. It depends on how you formulate your diet. It could actually be worse and not better. So that's why it's important when you do a plant-based diet or a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet, you make sure that it's well formulated. The word vegan and the word vegetarian doesn't automatically mean healthy. And that's really the point I'm trying to get across, that you need to make sure that it's well formulated. And let's see. And then the one thing I want to make sure I mention is that you make sure you check in with us every week before I leave, and also join our No Guesswork group, because we are starting to get going on that, and join all our social media. And I'm going to answer, I got one more question that came through. Two more. Well, I do want to say two things. One is, what is making sure you're alkaline versus acidic? And what I would like to say about that is your body is very good at maintaining set points, as I mentioned before. So your blood pH is typically the same. Your body is very good at buffering things and making sure that your pH is the same in your blood. Now, your urine may be different as it gets rid of certain things, because your kidneys work at maintaining that pH balance. So your body is good at maintaining your pH. And if you worry about things that are acidic versus alkaline, you need to make sure that you keep going back to it again. Keep your carbs down, because that will make you acidic, if you will. But again, your body is typically exactly the same, 7.40. Anywhere between 7.35 and 7.45, your body maintains that range, and your body is very good at it. But keeping your carbohydrates down is very good. And someone asked, can everyone do a plant-based diet? And the answer is, for the most part, yes. I can't think of a reason why someone would not be able to do a plant-based diet unless they're allergic to something. And the problem becomes if it's difficult to do, because a lot of times a well-formulated plant-based diet is not typically processed, so that you're going to be making fresh foods. But that's where meal prepping comes in. So if you make, let's say on a Sunday, if you make prep your food for the week, you can do that. And again, a plant-based diet doesn't necessarily mean that you are a vegan or vegetarian. It just means that you're mostly plant-based. And so that you may be a pescatarian who does mostly plants. Or you may be a low carb person who does mostly plants. It is not mutually exclusive. A vegan is a vegan. They do not eat animal products, period. And so, but you can be plant-based, meaning that you're mostly plants, but you may eat other things. And someone else on IG asked, what does it mean to be inflamed? And so inflammation in your body is something that we can measure with a blood test. And so I measure blood tests from my patients all the time. There's these inflammatory markers, one called CRP, one called ESR, and there are other inflammatory markers that you can measure as well. Your body can produce inflammation, and it can be a chronic inflammatory process. And most of the inflammation comes from your visceral fat. So the fat that's in our belly that I talk about a lot, and the fat cell itself is the one that actually releases these inflammatory markers that then cause a cascade of issues, and they affect other cells and make them inflamed, thus causing another cascade that then leads to other things like diabetes, cancer, all these other, and it just wreaks havoc in your body. So the reason I said I focus on obesity is because the goal to reduce inflammation is to reduce obesity. Now, if you don't have a lot of visceral fat, then you still should do an anti-inflammatory diet, whether it's a low-carb anti-inflammatory diet or whether it's a vegan or plant-based diet. You can eat a vegan diet and it could be very inflammatory. Again, if it's not well formulated. So that if you were eating a bunch of French fries and pizza and those things, that would be considered vegan, but that would also be considered super inflammatory. And so you need to be careful about what you eat and what you call the type of diet that you're eating. Just because you say it's a vegan or vegetarian or plant-based doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy. But it is healthy if you make sure it's well formulated and you stay away from a lot of sugar, sweets, and refined carbohydrates. And those are the key elements, really, of how to use food as medicine. If you can keep your body from producing and storing fat that then causes inflammation and then wreaks havoc throughout your body, you can better your health. And so by doing that, by keeping your carbohydrates down, by making sure you get your protein sources and making sure you get your green veggies, you will have formulated yourself a very good, healthy diet, whether it's plant-based, vegan, vegetarian, low carb. You would have increased your health. And then if you add your exercise onto it, you're on the money. So again, thank you guys for listening. Make sure you tune in every week. Make sure you tell your friends. Join our group, and so we can start a discussion. And if you have other questions, we can easily answer them there. Make sure you follow us on social media and our YouTube channel. And you enjoy your week. Happy Monday to everybody, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.